Hi, everyone. Excited about this session. I'm Abby Guha, and I want to share a little bit of a personal perspective on this session. When I was asked whether or not I wanted to help moderate this session, I said yes immediately. And it wasn't just because I was a woman. In my perspective, whenever you get a chance to sit with an individual or individuals who have charted their own course through some very nebulous paths and have defied the odds, that is a wonderful opportunity for learning, for me personally and hopefully for the audience. And for me, what's fascinating is what are the self-beliefs, what are the core mindsets that help an individual along a journey where there aren't that many role models around. And that can apply to men or women. There are things that each of us are doing in this room where there may not be a precedent set. And the learnings apply to all of us, both genders. So this is called a Women in Technology Leadership session, and it very much is that. But it's not just a session by women for women, although hopefully the women will draw inspiration from this conversation, certainly. But it's an inclusive conversation that involves all of us who are charting our own course in life and work. We're traversing nebulous paths, whether that be in life or work, with customers or other stakeholders. And the other reason for this, what motivated me to want to participate is it's a celebration of what's possible. All of us in this room is a celebration for what's possible and what's yet to be possible. So that said, it's a great pleasure and a privilege to share the stage with these two amazing panelists. I'll start off on the left. Stina, I said I'll introduce you, but you really need no introduction. We all know you, and it's your entrepreneurial spirit that's a driving force for why all of us are here in this room and in the virtual sphere. But Debby, many of us know who Debby is, but there may be some in the room who don't, so I
think a lot of people don't know who I am.
and so I just want to turn the stage over to you to share a little bit about your background in general,
Sure.
and also your time with Yubico.
Sure. I guess, I've always considered myself fortunate in terms of mindset, honestly because I found engineering, right? It was something I loved and I was good at, and there were actually jobs. Wow, the trifecta, right? So I started double major math and computer science, and unlike Stina, who really blazed a trail by founding a company, I took initially the much more traditional route of working inside companies. And my very first company after I graduated was Bell Labs, and again, I was very fortunate because they sent me to Stanford to get my master's degree in computer science. And I was there for a bit, but honestly, I realized I'm just not a big company person, too structured and such, so I left, gravitating towards startup companies. And frankly, my goal back then was to be a VP of engineering and a millionaire by the time I was 30. That was my goal. So I had a progression of engineering roles, right? I was a software engineer. I became a tech lead. I was an engineering manager. I was a director of engineering. And finally, I got to be VP of engineering.
At Netscape?
No, my very first VP of engineering company failed. The first company where I was VP of engineering, so learnings there. My second company where I was VP of engineering was successful, and it was acquired by Netscape. So, speaking of riding the wave, right? I got to ride the whole internet wave, and I was in charge of the browser. It was lots of crazy stories from back then. But then Netscape started getting big too, right? We got bought by AOL, and then I left right before we got purchased by Time Warner. And so I sort of transitioned into an operating role in a VC firm. I got to work with startups again, which I really enjoyed. And then, different than Stina, but I blazed a bit of a path in forming my own kind of career where I went out on my own and developed a model of being an interim CTO, VP of engineering. And through an introduction by Wendy to Stina, I joined Yubico in 2020. So I actually ran engineering here for about 9 months. I got to meet and work with many of you, so thank you so much for being so welcoming and putting up with me. But then we found the fabulous Hung, and the past year or so, I've been an advisor with Yubico, continuing to work with Hung in engineering and some of the C staff, and then also coaching several of the engineering managers and other women leaders.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I want to pick up on something you just mentioned, and that is your background at Netscape. So Netscape is, of course, one of the kind of early browsers that was foundational to a lot of the modern browsers that we now use. And I was just curious, what was you were leading an engineering team there. What was your experience of being a female leader at a company like Netscape, and how has business, Silicon Valley certainly, but business in general changed in the last 25 years?
Well, since I'm even older than that, Abby, we can probably say 30 to 35 years, but you know, it's certainly gotten way better, right? And I think honestly, largely because there's so many more women in the field, right? And women leaders. But I think we can and must do way better, right? But it's certainly gotten better. But you know, back in the very early days, right, I was, like I'm sure Stina was at times, I was the only woman in the room. I remember some awkward incidents, let's say. You know, I was the only woman in a meeting, and there was a visiting male exec, and he asked me to get coffee. I didn't get the coffee, right? I was like, no. Or I was at another company, and I told the folks I was working with that I got engaged, and one of our business development partners very sincerely came up to me and he said, "I'm so sorry to hear you'll be leaving." And I was like, "What?" And his assumption was that I would be quitting my job after I got married, right? And then another really terrific male boss I had, when I told him one of my female engineers was pregnant, the very first words out of his mouth were, "There goes the schedule." But I say these because these guys were fabulous people, right? They were good. But the issue was they just weren't used to working with kind of smart, driven, technical women side by side, right? So, but then on the flip side, when I was at Netscape and I was home on maternity leave, my boss called me at home and promoted me. So yay, right? But things, you know, they're so much better these days, right? And just because we are in the workplace. And look at Yubico, right? We have Camilla, we have Emanuela, we have Wendy, and we're all led by the fearless Stina, right? So things have gotten so much better.
Yeah, I mean, it really just goes to speak to, you know, enlightenment has no gender. And in that sense, there are fabulous men and women have been working together for many years. Opportunities to grow and learn. And this part of these sessions, the purpose of this type of a discussion in this forum is to just, for those who are not walking the paths that you have walked, to give them a little bit more empathy, a little bit more understanding of some of the challenges and opportunities that exist. But I have to say a company like Yubico has a fabulous group of men and women that have all converged in this one company to create a wonderful vibe. Stina, I'll just turn to you. You came to Silicon Valley just about 11 or so years ago, so you're a pioneer in your own right within the environment of Silicon Valley. I'm just curious, what has your experience been and observations been just in the time that you've been in the tech sphere in the US?
It's definitely getting better. When I joined, or when I came here, it was more of a macho culture. Mm-hmm. The cool companies that were highlighted as the winners, they all had very aggressive macho guys. If you look at someone like Satya Nadella and others now, people have noticed that being caring and including people and having a diverse team is actually the modern, most successful way of leading companies. It's not just Yubico. The biggest companies on the planet have realized that the best teams are when they are diverse. So I am seeing a really good shift.
And sort of like this modern leadership approach of being heart-centered.
Yeah.
Heart-centered leadership, which again is not relegated to just men or women. It's just having a perspective of the other person, your teams, and seeing them as people beyond just their roles. Debbie, you've led teams in a variety of different companies and environments, kind of picking up on what Stina was mentioning in terms of what has been your experience in terms of the cultures or the work environments where people have thrived the most? And you've led engineering teams where admittedly not that many women are, even to this day. What unique elements do women bring to a work environment, would you say?
Well, I think it's the diversity, right? And the heart. I very much agree with what Stina said, that leading from the heart benefits men and women, right? And to be a great leader, I think people have to trust you. They have to want to follow you. And they have to believe that you not only have the best interest of the company at heart, but you have their interests and you care about them. And if we think about environments, cultures, right? I really don't think homogenous environments work as well, whether it's all men or all women or all Indian or all Asian, right? All of anything isn't the best in my experience, right? It's in a mixed environment where both genders and various races, they really bring their strengths to bear that I think we see the best results. And I think the research bears out that diverse teams are much more innovative and they're just higher performing. And I've been in and out of a lot of different companies and that really rings true. And I'll probably get this quote wrong, but I like it. When Bill Gates was visiting Saudi Arabia many years ago, he was asked, how do we make our country more competitive? And his answer was something like, well, if you're not fully utilizing half of the country's talent, you're not going to get very close to the top, right? So brilliant.
Right. Yeah, it's sort of like lost capital, lost brain power.
Exactly.
If you're not utilizing a big chunk of the population that has a lot to share, but maybe is going untapped in that sense. Stina, from one of the things I talked about, which is one of the reasons I personally was interested in participating in this panel and just being in the audience as the closest proxy to being in the audience, is this idea of mindset and what is that firmware inside that allows you to, for example, you move from Sweden to the US. That's already a cultural shift. Then you're a female CEO in a male-dominated field. Any one of these challenges could be enough for someone to deal with, and yet you're continuing to chart your course in a very competitive and a pretty hard-charging environment. I'm just curious on what is that core mindset that when you walk into a business meeting or just into a room in general, what's that mindset that you walk in with that allows you to transcend all of the gender biases or any other biases that may exist?
So luckily I had parents who encouraged me to take risks and to be creative. And as an example, when I was a little girl, I liked to climb trees, big trees. And I remember I was 5 years old, I was high up in a tree, and my father was further down, and he said, Stina, how's the view up there? He was never afraid that I would fall. And I do think that this helped me set that first piece that is really important. It's self-confidence, take the risk, because if you don't learn that early, you can train it. A lot of people train it, and so I'm not saying it's too late if you don't have parents like mine, but it definitely helps.
Sure.
And that's the mindset that helped me when I walk into a room. Independent, I'm sitting in front of 200 people, or meeting President Obama, or Mark Benioff, or the Swedish Crown Prince, or Debby Meredith, or anyone who's cool who I've got the opportunity to meet with. I just focus on the job. I don't really care what they think about me. I think I'm cool as I am, and I know that I have my flaws, and I'm not perfect, but I am focused on the job. And here is a secret for all of you. I do believe in the saying, the dog will bite the one who's scared. So if you walk into the room and have sort of, oh, they're angry at me, they are like, I'm less than them, or I need to prove myself, or whatever, people will sense that. And it will be a self-fulfilling prophecy. Whatever you put out, you'll get back. So practice self-confidence. Be safe in your skin. Be yourself. And it can be trained with coaches and mentors like Debbie and others if you didn't have parents like mine.
I think that's a wonderful story. This idea of, and I can't say too many parents would be like that, where they would encourage, they wouldn't introduce fear into the mix. This idea of this self-fulfilling prophecy. Not everybody in this room, I'm very fortunate as well. If I were to speak personally, I have had parents who have been extremely encouraging. I'm the daughter of a father who not one day made me feel like there's nothing I couldn't do if I set my mind to. So those of us who have had that experience, it's a great privilege. I don't take it lightly. But this idea that self-fulfilling prophecy, if you walk into a room with the baggage that I'm XYZ, I'm a woman, or you fill in the blank for whatever area that you may be struggling with, people can pick up on that. That's the dog will bite the one who's scared idea. I think there's another element, perhaps, which is probably unspoken, which is you assume the best of the other side. So you don't assume less of yourself, but you assume goodwill from the other side as well.
You have to start with that.
Yeah.
Don't be
Assume
defensive.
good intention.
Yeah. Right. So in that sense, then the good energy comes back your way and matches what you're putting out. Debbie, I'm curious. This idea of seniority and leadership. We're talking about women in leadership, or just leadership in general, and you're both advanced in your careers and done a lot. What is your notion of the seniority and leadership? Are they joint, or can they be exclusive? And what were your early years when perhaps you were a leader but not yet senior?
That's a great question. I think people often confuse leadership with positional power or seniority, and I don't think they're tied together at all. I think anyone can demonstrate leadership at really any point in their career, irregardless of age. And as you said, earlier on in my career, I did typically manage all-male teams, right? And mostly they were men who were older than I was. And it worked. It worked really well, right? And often several of them followed me to other companies, and I got a lot of support, which was terrific. There were a few higher-ups who I felt would pat me on the head and say, "You're doing so well for your age," which it just drove me crazy. No one tells me I'm doing so well for my age anymore, so maybe I should have appreciated it, but at the time I didn't. But I'm a big believer that leadership can be demonstrated at any age and any point in your career.
So you don't have to have a title necessarily, or to be given that validation from the outside. You can be a leader of either gender at any point in time.
Yeah. And I like the saying, you do the job before you get the job, right? If someone's just taking charge and leading, well, gosh, I need a leader. That person, you're doing it, right?
Right, yeah, absolutely. I think, Stina, you have somebody in your country who is not very old, who's making some pretty big waves.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, Greta Thunberg. She's 16 or 17 or whatever.
Wow.
And she just fearless is telling the world we need to take care of our environment and climate. And no one is stopping her, and no one has asked her or encouraged her to take that position. She just did it.
She just did it.
She's a big inspiration.
Right, absolutely. I'm just mindful of time. I'll ask one more question and then open it up to the audience. For both of you, it's a question to both of you. Who is a female leader that has inspired you? Maybe Debbie, you start first.
Well, there weren't a lot when I was growing up. So I would say maybe similar to Stina, but it was my mother. My mother always told me I could be anything I wanted to be, and I believed it, right? And I really hope, as a mother of 2 daughters myself, I hope that I've passed on that growth mindset to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Stina?
And I would pick an author, a Swedish author of children books. Her name is Astrid Lindgren, and she wrote the book Pippi Longstocking that has been profound for millions of kids around the world to be kind and brave and creative and question authorities. I don't know if you've read Pippi Longstocking. I mean, she didn't care about polices or government or whatever. She just did her thing. And she has inspired women around the world. She inspired Lady Gaga. She inspired Madonna. She inspired like Michelle Obama. And I wouldn't want to put myself in those 3 women's category, but she did give me, you can be strong and do your thing. Mm-hmm. So, and she sold millions of books. So she was both an inspiration and very successful in her field.
Right, yeah, that's a great story. So at this point, I think just in the last 5 minutes or so, I'd like to open it up for audience questions. If you'd like to come up to the mic and ask anything that's on your mind.
I'll take you up on that offer.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is fantastic. Thank you so much. I mean, really wonderful. So I guess the question I would have is, how do you recommend that we as women support the other women around us? Like, I may not be a manager, but how can I support my teammates? How can I support them as women in our jobs and at Yubico, or in life, I guess?
I'll give that to you.
Oh, great, okay. Well, it sounds like, the first thing is recognition, right? I mean, wanting to support them. So I think praising people when they do well and calling out what they do well, because I do think one of the traits of women sometimes is they undervalue their talents, right? So building them up. But if you do also see something that you don't think is quite right, take them aside, right? I'm a big believer in praise in public and criticize in private, but giving them the opportunity, or if you're in a meeting and you haven't heard from perhaps a shyer woman, hey Susie, do you have something to say, right? Try to be inclusive that way. Give them a space to jump in.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Yeah?
Hi, so this question is directed to Debbie and Stina. So you've both obviously have had fulfilling and amazing careers. What do you wish you had tried sooner or learned sooner?
Stina, maybe you start?
I'm going to be very practical. Please sleep. There's actually some kind of chemical substance that is created when we're awake, and if we don't sleep, it poisons our brain, so we can't think clearly. We get aggressive, we don't get creative, we lose our empathy, and we make really poor decisions. Some of my worst decisions, and sometimes has been really bad to my team, that is often when I didn't have a good night's sleep. And when you don't sleep, here's another thing, on that subject, when you are faced with a challenge or an issue, don't act on it directly. Go to bed. Sleep on it. Don't go back aggressively. Yeah, that was my answer to your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Right.
Debbie?
We'll have to talk to Jacob about making sure you get enough sleep. I would say I wish I had realized sooner the importance of understanding people, or EQ, as folks say. I'm fortunate, and that's something that comes naturally to me. But I do think that empathy is so important in communication and building bridges. And I wish I'd realized that sooner. And sort of, to my point earlier, I think women, maybe they don't recognize their talents as immediately, or they even downplay them. Like, what I would just think was, well, that can't be important because it's so easy for me, right? But I was perhaps unusual, particularly for a woman in tech. And you even, what I've seen, and I think there's been research on it, a woman will only apply for a job if she meets about 90+% of the qualifications listed. But a man will apply for a job if he meets about 60%, right? So it's related to confidence and such, but I think for me, the EQ, realizing that was really important.
Because it came so easily that
I know, I downplayed it. I was
right.
like, no, I need to be smarter at this, or I need to, brush up on my algorithms, or
yeah, I would
something
say
like
for me personally, even though the question wasn't directed at me, but it may be relatable. I like to write. I write a lot as part of my day-to-day work. It came so easily to me that I didn't think it was really a skill at all. I used to think, well, I'm not as strong on numbers. I'm not a quantitative girl. I'm a qualitative words person. And for the longest time, I didn't think tech was the right field for me, because I thought, well, I'm probably in the writing, some sort of artistic field. Until later, I started to appreciate that not everybody likes to write. Actually, everybody specializes in their own areas, and really doubling down and appreciating your own strengths. You don't have to be like everybody else, and that applies to men and women, that whatever comes easily and naturally to you, that what you're excited about genuinely, that is your superpower. And somebody will appreciate that somewhere. But before you wait for somebody else to appreciate it, you should appreciate that for yourself. So with that, I really want to thank both of you, Debby, Stina, for wonderful. For me, it was a real pleasure to be part of this conversation, and hopefully you guys enjoyed it as well and took away some of these things for your own lives. The questions that we discussed, how does that apply to yourself for your own life and work? And with that, we'll close out this session. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Abby.